Texas guy makes big promises. Some keep, some don't. John Wesley Hardin was born beneath that sky 1853, son of a circuit-riding preacher who carried scripture like a compass and a mother who kept a table where hunger learned its manners. The boy grew long in the leg and quick in the hand. Schoolhouse ink stained his fingers. Fence rails softened his palms. He learned letters and livestock, psalms and saddle work, and the frontier's old equation, attention first, explanations later. Then war blew across the counties like weather that had forgotten how to stop. Uniforms divided roads and families. When peace finally signed its name elsewhere, Reconstruction signed it again in Texas. Laws new, customs stubborn, men learning and unlearning at the same time. In that hard weather, a boy's pride became an older man's quarrel too soon. Stories differ, but the record agrees on this. Violence arrived early in his life and found a place to sit. First killing, no need to be graphic, left grief behind in a black family that deserved peace, left a young man riding hard with fear, defiance, and bad advice, all arguing inside one body. From that day forward, John Wesley moved like a man being measured by the horizon. He hid. He worked. He learned the craft of cattle trails north to Abilene and back, wagon ruts like braided rope across the prairie, night herd songs that keep beeves and mines from stampeding. A good trail boss taught him patience. Bad night taught him what a second is worth. He shot well, that part of the legend is true. But skill with a pistol is the sort of gift that charges interest. Kansas railheads were their own kind of sermon. Abilene in 71 had Wild Bill's long coat and longer reputation watching doorways. Hardin's later stories about gamblers and snorers and quick draws grew taller in retellings, shrunk under ledgers, settled somewhere between truth and a young man's appetite for being noticed. He went home. Restless, Texas was a quilt stitched from new courthouses and old grudges, cow towns, county seats. Creeks with memory, he married Jane, tried ordinary for a season, then ordinary tried him. Pride traveled quicker than telegraph. Feuds did their arithmetic in whispers. John Wesley kept writing, kept meeting men whose tempers wanted to be teachers. He learned the frontier grammar of de-escalation late and the frontier grammar of survival early. He did not yet know that the badge he would fear most was the one attached to the mirror, conscience, but he had begun to feel a tug. Abilene's echo, Texas feuds, and a deputy in the street, a cattle trail's last songs, a county quarrel that grows teeth, a noon in Comanche where a split second becomes a year. A man can carry a town on his boots. Abilene clung like dust, not just stories, but the posture of them, how a room changes when a quiet young fellow is rumored quick. Back in Texas, rumor meant responsibility. Disputes over horses, over cards, over which set of papers told the truth about authority, these were common wins. John Wesley met too many of them head-on. He rode the Chisholm again, then drifted south to courthouse squares where Saturday afternoons tried to be peaceful and often failed. Some killings came in self-defense, some in anger, some in the blur where both keep or records. He learned to move on before names turned into posses. May 1874, Comanche, Texas. Streets hot enough to make mules honest. Deputy Sheriff Charles Webb from Brown County rides in, quiet, competent, respected. Words are exchanged, whose words, which order, depends on who writes the account. What does not change is the ending. A pistol lifts, a shot answers, a lawman falls. Men run. The town shouts. The state hears. That afternoon pinned a warrant to Hardin's back bigger than any he had managed before. Family got swept in. Friends too. Kind of community wound that does not stay local. Texas took the measure of the moment and sent rangers, the 1870s kind, lean and unsentimental, led by men who treated miles like a tool and papers like obligations. Among them John B. Armstrong, who did not assign adjectives to fugitives, just routes. Hardin ran east, then farther. Aliases tried on, discarded. He rode with cousins, with silence, with the kind of worry that makes a man look older in windows. Trains replaced horses for a while. He found himself under Gulf air, then pine shade, then far enough that Texas sounded like a dream you don't tell at breakfast. The chase passed through towns that forgot it by Monday in towns that would remember it in barbershops for 20 years. Telegram offers to sheriff's desk to saddle to rail car. Law learning to use speed. Outlaw learning the same lesson a minute slower. Pensacola train, Armstrong's shot. And the trip back in irons, a night coach, Florida air thick as syrup, a door flung wide, a marshal's voice, then a long ride west obsessed with paperwork for company. August 1877. Pensacola. A train's wooden breath in the small hours. Armstrong boards like a sentence that has finally found its verb. Hardin reaches for his pistol the way a habit reaches for a man. Shots crack in close quarters, brief, terrible ending with John Wesley pinned to the moment history had been writing for him. No need to savor the noise, only the fact captured. The journey back to Texas had its own theater. Crowds at depots, whispers like prairie wind. A young outlaw with a famous temper sitting very still because irons prefer stillness. In court the language grows formal. Indictment, voir dire, charge. Verdict. Comanche is on the docket even when the trial sits elsewhere. Hardin is convicted. Sentence, 25 years in the state penitentiary. Stone and schedule begin their work. Huntsville's red walls, razor wire before the century learns the word, factories of motion, weaving, hammering, endless small agreements with time. In the quiet between tasks, a man can become worse or different. John Wesley read law, scripture, biography. He wrote letters to a wife whose days did not wait for him, to children who grew along margins he could not turn. He tutored, worked in the prison shop, nursed small hopes the way a man keeps a plant in a windowsill, and counts the leaves this week versus last. He prayed in a fashion that sounded like resolve more than like bargain. Years took their due. Elsewhere, Jane died before freedom could be shared. Children scattered with the weather of relatives and necessity. The outside world fitted itself with telephones in new towns and a different kind of law that rode more paper than horses. Inside, Hardin grew older in the deliberate way men do when choices are rationed. He practiced stillness without pretending it was peace. He learned to argue with his own past in sentences that had fewer excuses and more periods. In 1894, parole discussed, clemency granted. The gate opened. The day on the other side smelled raw and sweet. He had served 17 years. Parole waited with a face that looked both familiar and new. Release, law books, and a city that doesn't whisper El Paso. License exam, a shingle, a desert town with a railroad heartbeat, a man trying to be something else while his name keeps reminding him who he was.
Freedom requires practice. So does modesty. After headlines, John Wesley set himself to both. He studied until the pages stopped arguing. He passed the bar exam and hung a lawyer's shingle with a careful pride, not triumph. Just the door he could walk through mornings without borrowing anyone's trouble. El Paso made room. A border town becoming a city. Tracks bringing lawsuits as often as cattle. Rooms where a man's counsel could be sold and slept on in the same building. He dressed well, spoke low, played cards socially as if to prove to himself that cards could be merely cards. He kept company, not all of it helpful, an old habit of standing where storms might form. He tangled himself in a local dispute that liked to change names when you looked at it from different corners of the room. A woman, fees, pride, sideways, threats that wear a constable's badge one day and a street rumor the next. John Selman was part of that weather. Older, armed, accustomed to deciding. The city had two men with histories and only one small stage at a time. For a few months, the peace held the way a hat stays on in a moderate wind. Paperwork, clients, coffee, a walk to the office across boards that creaked themselves friendly. Evenings that ended without noise. Then August made the boards hot. Words accumulated in alleys where words do not improve. Two men kept not quite meeting until the day they did. Acme Saloon Night, a life's ledger, and what we keep. A doorway, a sudden shot. Newspapers busy again. Then the longer, quieter accounting we owe the living and the dead.
August 19th, 1895. El Paso evening, hot as a stove lid. The Acme Saloon keeps its doors open to let the air argue through. Inside, talk bumps into chairs and slides off. People who know each other enough to not stand apart enough to pretend they don't. Hardin plays dice or cards or only talks depending on which witness learned truth first from nerves. He steps toward the bar, turns a little, and the roan decides to remember what happened next for a century. A shot from behind from John Selman ends the conversation. No flourish, no dual curtain call, just the brutal finality the West always had in stock. Papers sprint. Some are gleeful in the way headlines sometimes are when they think they have tittied a narrative. Others attempt balance, preacher's son, prisoner's reader, lawyer's apprentice. Violent man. complicated citizen. All these fit in one column if the typesetter is honest and the editor patient. Selman stands trial, then walks out on a hung jury, then dies violent later, a symmetry no one requested and few found satisfying. What remains for us in this slow register for sleep? A recognition that frontier lives were often collisions of youth, pride, policy, and chance. That John Wesley Hardin harmed and was harmed, survived and was stopped. That the families whose losses paid for his learning deserve to be named first in any complete prayer. And that a man who learned law late and practiced it briefly still tells a caution. Skill without humility invites noise. Legends without context sell tickets and bankrupt truth. We set his ledger down gently. We look ahead without hurrying. Another Texas name approaches, not a gunfighter of saloons, but a stage robber of rail age. A young man with an easy grin and a knack for choosing the wrong partners. Sam Bass, horses, trains, Round Rock. We will speak his parts with the same quiet care and place him in the procession where he belongs.